Today we're going to talk about Objective 13A, Video Notes, and Intro to Percents. So what are percents? Percents are the number of ways something occurs out of 100 times. So the number of ways something occurs or happens out of 100 times. So what symbol do we use to represent a percent? A lot of times you'll see a percent sign. So let's look at directions for the first two problems. It says write each percent as a fraction. So it's given us 39%. We read this percent sign as percent. So to change that to a fraction, we simply take the 39 and we write it over 100. Let's look at number 2. 6%. 6% would be changed to 6 over 100. Now let's move on down to the next problem. The next problem says write each fraction as a percent. So in 3 and 4 we have to take the fraction, which basically says something happened 17 times out of 100, and we have to write it as a percent. So we just simply take the top number, 17, and we put a percent on there. As long as this bottom number is 100, it really is easy to write it as a percent. Try number 4, 5 over 100. Well, that would be 5%. Moving forward, the next 5 through 8 says write each percentage as a decimal. Now this one can be a little bit tricky, but in math, if you realize that in number 3 and 4, when you're dividing by 100, what happens is you're basically moving the decimal place to the left 2 places. So in number 5, we take the 18 and we simply get rid of the percent and we pretend there's a decimal point here. And we move that decimal place 2 places to the left. So our answer would be 0.18. In number 6, we have 81%. Again, we get rid of the 81% sign and we put a decimal there and we move it to the left 2 places. When we move it to the left 2 places, we always want to add a 0. So this is 0.81. Number 7, 4%. 4%, single digits can get a little tricky because we rewrite the 4, put the decimal there instead of the percent, and we move it 2 places. But there's not a second number here to actually move it from. So what we do is we act like there's a 0 in front of the 4, and now we have the same problem as number 5 and 6. Our final answer is 0.04. Look at number 8, 1%. Again, get rid of the percent sign. We have the decimal on the right. We move it 1, 2, we add a 0 because there's not a second number, and now we add in the 0 and the decimal, so our final answer is 0.01. So that's an easy way to do percents to decimals. Basically, move the decimal place 2 places to your left. The next directions in 9 through 11 say write each decimal as a percentage. Well, in 5 through 8, we move the decimal place to the left 2 places to go to a decimal. Now we're going the opposite direction. So what we do is we move the decimal to the right 2 places. And so 0.75 is actually 75. And rather than write a decimal, because we have to signify that it's different, we write a percent sign. In number 10, we would move it 2 places to the right. So the decimal place would go 1, 2 places to the right. And that would be 0.03%. But we don't write 0 in front of it, so it's really just 3%. So we're going to erase that 0, and we're going with 3%. Number 11, we would move the decimal to the right 2 places. But on this one, we end up getting 5.8%. It's okay in math to have a decimal for a percentage. Usually in real life, you won't see a lot of decimals. For instance, like there's a 40% chance it's going to rain. There's a 60% chance I'm going to get a good grade on the test. You usually don't use a lot of decimals, but decimals are more for precision. If you want to be really accurate, you'd say there's a 5.8% chance. Not quite 6, but a 5.8% chance. Let's look at number 12 and number 13. It says, write each fraction as a decimal and as a percentage. This gets a little trickier because the one thing you'll notice in 12 and 13 is that the bottom number is not 100. If this bottom number is not 100, you have to do something different. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to our calculator and we're actually going to remember fractions are like decimals. Fractions can also be thought of as division. So what we're going to do on our calculator is we're going to do 3 divided by 8. So we're going to go over to our calculator. Just a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our TI Nspire calculator out. And we're going to do 3 divided by 8. But if you remember in our scavenger hunt, we want to approximate this. We don't want 3 over 8 as a fraction, because we know it's 3 over 8. Remember, we want to do control answer. So control negative gets our answer. And then we're going to do control and the enter, which is an approximation. So we know that 3/8 is 0.375. So now we can go back and we know that this is 0.375 as a decimal. So that's the first answer to the question, was write it as a decimal. Now, if we want to do it as a percentage, what we're going to do is move this decimal, 0.375, 2 places to the right. 1, 2. So we know that this is 37.5%. Once you get better at this, you might actually be able to do kind of as you go without actually moving it. You can just kind of count over in your head and write it as a percentage. All right, let's look at number 13. 2 over 3. So we know that 2 over 3, we know that we don't have 100 in the bottom. So we're actually going to divide it on the calculator. So we're going to go back to our calculator. And we're going to type in 2 divided by 3. Oh, nice. I'm using my answer. Sorry, I got to delete that quick. 2 divided by 3. And remember, if we hit enter, that's going to give us 2/3. But we want to take our answer. So control, negative sign, control, enter, and that gives us 0.666667. So 2/3 is pretty much 0.6666. So we go back to our notes, and we know that it's 0.666. And you don't have to write all the 6s. I would write maybe 2, 3 of them, and then change that to a decimal. So we're going to take 0.66, and we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. So we would say it's 66.6%. Okay, that concludes Objective 13A video notes. I hope tomorrow you come ready to go, and we look forward to seeing you. Have a good night.